First Contact in Biology 401. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies pierced the purple sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside the most prestigious xenobiology classroom in the known universe, Professor Zewextal's tentacles rippled with barely contained excitement as he addressed his students. Today marks a historic occasion, he announced, his translator converting his native clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. For the first time in our institution's history, we have a human enrolled in advanced xenobiology studies. The classroom erupted in whispers and nervous chittering. At the back of the room, James Harrison fought the urge to sink lower in his specially reinforced chair. He was used to being the center of attention by now. 6 months into his exchange program, he was still the only human on campus, but this felt different. The other students, a diverse collection of beings from across the galaxy, kept shooting him furtive glances. There was RYLTX, a floating cloud of sentient gas contained within an environmental suit, Vex, for 27, a silicon-based crystalline entity who sparkled with every movement, and dozen others, each more alien than the last. None of them, however, came from what the galactic community called a Deathworld. Professor Zewextal's primary eyes focused on James while his secondary set monitored the rest of the class. Mr. Harrison's presence offers us an unprecedented opportunity. As you all know, Earth is classified as a Category 12 Deathworld, a planet so hostile that most species would perish within minutes of exposure to its natural environment. James suppressed a smile. He'd grown up in suburban Minnesota, hardly the death-threatening environment his classmates imagined. Still, he understood their perspective. To species that evolved on worlds with minimal gravity, stable climates, and no predators, Earth must seem like a nightmare. Today, Professor Zewextal continued, we will examine one of Earth's most fascinating creatures. He gestured toward a shimmering force field at the front of the room. Mr. Harrison has graciously arranged for the transport of a specimen from his homeworld. The force field flickered and became transparent, revealing a containment unit. Inside was a creature that caused several students to emit distress pheromones. Even Vex 427's crystalline structure vibrated with anxiety. This, the professor announced with dramatic flair, is what humans call a wolf. The creature in question was a magnificent gray wolf, currently lying calmly in its containment unit. James knew it had been carefully selected from a wildlife sanctuary and was well accustomed to human presence, but his classmates didn't need to know that detail just yet. As you can observe, Professor Zewextal continued, this predator possesses multiple rows of killing implements in its oral cavity, reinforced muscle structure capable of generating immense force, and sensory organs adapted for hunting. On most worlds, such a creature would be classified as an apex predator. On Earth, it is merely one of many similar species. A gelatinous student named Blorp raised a pseudopod. Professor, is it true that humans keep modified versions of these creatures in their dwellings? Indeed, James spoke up for the first time, his voice carrying clearly through the room. We call them dogs. They've been our companions for thousands of years. The collective shock in the room was palpable. RYLTX's gaseous form swirled in agitation. You mean to tell us that Deathworlders not only survived alongside such creatures but domesticated them? James stood up, his movement causing several nearby students to flinch. Professor, with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate something. Professor Zewextal's tentacles curled in what James had learned was an expression of scholarly interest. By all means, Mr. Harrison. The containment unit is secured with multiple redundant systems, so. Before he could finish, James was already walking toward the wolf's enclosure. The class watched in horror as he signaled to the professor to lower the force field. With a few quick movements, James opened the containment unit and stepped inside. The wolf raised its head, ears perked forward. James slowly knelt beside it, maintaining calm, confident body language. The wolf's tail began to wag gently, a detail that caused several students to emit warning sounds, mistaking it for aggression. This is Luna, James explained, scratching behind the wolf's ears. She's part of an educational program that teaches people about wolf conservation. While she's still a wild animal and deserves respect, she's also an ambassador helping us understand these magnificent creatures. The class watched in stunned silence as Luna rolled onto her side, clearly enjoying the attention. James continued his impromptu lesson, explaining wolf pack dynamics, their role in Earth's ecosystem, and how studying them had helped humans understand their own social structures. But how? Vex 427's crystalline voice chimed like bells. How can you be so close to a predator without activating your flight response? James smiled, still petting Luna. Humans are predators too. We evolved alongside creatures like Luna. But we also evolved something else, the ability to form connections with other species. We learn to understand them, respect them, and in many cases, work together with them. Professor Zweigstal's tentacles were now writhing with excitement. Class, you are witnessing something extraordinary. This is why the study of xenobiology is so crucial. Every species, every world, has its own path of evolution, its own solutions to survival. Mr. Harrison and Luna are demonstrating that what one species sees as an insurmountable threat, another might see as a potential ally. As if to emphasize his point, Luna yawned, displaying her impressive teeth in what the humans knew was a sign of relaxation but caused several students to retreat to the far wall. James couldn't help but chuckle, remembering his own first days at the Institute, when he'd been equally fascinated by his classmates' alien characteristics. Professor, James said, standing up while Luna remained relaxed at his feet, I think this might be a good opportunity to discuss the concept of convergent evolution and how different worlds can produce similar solutions to evolutionary challenges. The rest of the class period turned into an impromptu seminar on predator-prey relationships across various worlds, with James and Luna serving as living examples. By the end of the session, a few of the braver students had even moved closer to observe Luna, though none quite worked up the courage to enter the containment unit. As the three suns finally set and the class prepared to end, Professor Zweigstal made an announcement that would change the course of xenobiology studies at the Institute forever. In light of today's extraordinary demonstration, I am proposing a new addition to our curriculum, Deathworld Ecology and Integration. Mr. Harrison, would you be interested in serving as a teaching assistant? James looked at Luna, then at his classmates, seeing fear gradually being replaced by curiosity in their various alien expressions. I would be honored, Professor. Though I should warn you, Luna is actually one of the less intimidating predators from Earth. The collective gasp that followed assured James that the next semester would be very interesting indeed. Breaking down barriers. News of the wolf incident spread through the Galactic Institute faster than a quantum transmission. By the next morning, James Harrison's demonstration had become the talk of every crystalline corridor and anti-gravity cafeteria. Students from other departments began finding excuses to pass by Professor Zweigstal's xenobiology classroom, hoping to catch a glimpse of the human who dared to share space with an Earth predator. I still don't understand. RYLTX's gaseous form swirled in contemplative patterns as they floated beside James in the laboratory. Your species deliberately seeks out dangerous creatures. James adjusted his protective gear as he prepared for today's practical session. It's not about seeking danger, he explained, checking the seals on his gloves. It's about understanding our world. Every creature plays a vital role in Earth's ecosystem. Professor Zweigstal glided into the laboratory, his tentacles carrying various pieces of equipment. Precisely why today's lesson will be even more enlightening. Class, gather around, but maintain safe distance protocols. The professor's secondary eyes swiveled toward a new containment unit, significantly larger than the one that had housed Luna. Following the success of yesterday's demonstration, the Institute's board has approved an unprecedented request. Mr. Harrison, would you do the honors? James approached the unit, his heart racing with excitement. He knew what was inside, he'd helped arrange its transport, but the implications of this moment weren't lost on him. The containment field shimmered and dissolved, revealing a sight that caused several students to emit involuntary distress signals. Inside stood a young American black bear, carefully selected from a wildlife rehabilitation center. The bear, named Cosmos by its caretakers, had been raised in captivity after being orphaned and couldn't be released into the wild. Like Luna, it was accustomed to human presence, making it perfect for educational purposes. By all known galactic safety protocols, Professor Zyxtal announced, this creature should never have been allowed within 50 parsecs of an educational institution. However, Mr. Harrison has helped us understand that sometimes our protocols need updating. VEX 427's crystalline structure emitted a harmonic tone of curiosity. The database indicates this species can terminate most known life forms with a single strike. Yet humans regularly study them in their natural habitat. We do more than study them, James said, carefully entering the containment unit. Cosmos looked up lazily, more interested in the honey-covered enrichment toy in his enclosure than the human visitor. On Earth, we have entire professions dedicated to protecting and preserving species like this. We call them wildlife conservationists. The class watched in fascinated horror as James demonstrated proper behavior around bears, explaining warning signs, safe observation distances, and the importance of respecting wild animal space. The key, he explained, isn't dominating or controlling these creatures. It's understanding them. Blorp, the gelatinous student, had moved closer than any other classmate. But surely your species must have developed advanced weapons or force fields for protection? James shook his head. The most important tools we have are knowledge and respect. Most dangerous encounters between humans and wildlife happen because of misunderstandings or encroachment on habitat. When we take the time to understand and respect these animals, we can usually avoid conflict. Professor Zyxtal's tentacles rippled with academic excitement. Class, observe how Mr. Harrison maintains awareness of the creature's body language while continuing his lesson. This is not merely about physical proximity, it's about cognitive adaptation to potential threats. As if on cue, Cosmos stood on his hind legs, reaching his full height. Several students retreated rapidly, their various locomotion methods creating a cacophony of movement. James remained calm, demonstrating proper reaction techniques. See how he's not actually threatening me? James explained. He's curious. Bears often stand to get a better view or smell of their surroundings. Understanding these behaviors is crucial for anyone working in wildlife conservation. RYLTX's gaseous form had shifted to a shade indicating deep thought. It occurs to me that perhaps we have been approaching the study of Deathworld species incorrectly. We categorize based on potential threat, but we never considered the perspective of the species that co-evolved with them. An astute observation, Professor Zyxtal agreed. Which brings us to today's main lesson, adaptive intelligence versus instinctive response. Mr. Harrison, would you explain how humans overcame their natural fear response to study such creatures? James spent the next hour describing humanity's journey from fearing predators to studying and protecting them. He explained the concept of citizen science, wildlife photography, and how technology had helped humans better understand and coexist with dangerous species. As the lesson progressed, something remarkable happened. The students began asking more nuanced questions. Instead of focusing solely on the bear's deadly capabilities, they wanted to know about its role in the ecosystem, its intelligence, its social behaviors. That's what makes xenobiology so fascinating, James concluded, watching Cosmos investigate his enrichment toy. Every species, whether from Earth or the furthest reaches of the galaxy, has adapted to its environment in unique ways. Understanding those adaptations helps us understand ourselves better. Near the end of the class, Blorp raised a pseudopod hesitantly. Mr. Harrison, would it be possible, that is, with proper safety protocols, could we perhaps observe more Earth species? Professor Zyxtal's tentacles curled in what James now recognized as a smile. As it happens, the Institute Board has approved a whole series of controlled demonstrations. Though I should warn you, some Earth species make our friend Cosmos here look quite tame in comparison. As the class erupted in excited chatter, James caught the professor's primary eyes. They both knew that these lessons were about more than just wildlife. They were breaking down barriers of fear and misunderstanding, not just between species, but between worlds. What neither of them knew was that these lessons would prove far more crucial than anyone could have anticipated, especially when the Institute's containment systems faced an unexpected challenge in the days to come. The containment breach. The warning sirens began during what should have been a routine morning at the Galactic Institute. James Harrison was in the middle of explaining the hunting patterns of Earth's big cats to his increasingly fascinated classmates when the quantum-powered lights flickered and died. "Attention all beings," the Institute's AI announced in Galactic Common. "Critical power failure detected in Containment Block 7. Emergency protocols initiated. Please proceed to your designated safety zones." Professor Zewexdal's tentacles went rigid, a sign of extreme alarm that James had never seen before. "Containment Block 7, that's where we're housing all the Earth specimens." The reality of the situation hit James like a gravitational wave. Over the past week, the Xenobiology department had received several new specimens from Earth for their expanded curriculum: 2 timber wolves, a mountain lion, and most concerning of all, a saltwater crocodile. Each creature was safely contained in specialized habitats, until now. "Professor," James said, already moving toward the door, "we need to evacuate everyone who doesn't have experience with Earth predators. Then I need your help coordinating a containment response." The professor's primary eyes fixed on James while his secondary set monitored the panicking students. "The Institute's security protocols." "With all due respect, Professor," James interrupted, "your security protocols were designed for handling escaped specimens from low-gravity worlds and non-predatory species. These are Earth predators. We need Earth solutions." The emergency lights cast an eerie purple glow through the corridors as James quickly organized the response. RYLTX volunteered their gaseous form for aerial reconnaissance, while VEX 427's crystalline structure proved perfect for reflecting emergency signals across the campus. "Blorp," James addressed the gelatinous student who had shown such curiosity about Earth life, "I need your help. Your species can split into smaller forms while maintaining a hive mind, correct?" Blorp rippled with nervous agreement. "Yes, but I fail to see how. You're going to be our early warning system. Split up and position yourself at major intersections. If you spot any of the specimens, your smaller forms can alert us instantly through your hive-mind connection." Professor Zewexdal watched in amazement as James transformed from student to crisis coordinator. The human's calm efficiency in the face of what most species would consider absolute terror was remarkable. "Security drones are ineffective," RYLTX reported, their gaseous form condensing briefly near the group. "The crocodile has already disabled 3 of them. The wolves are moving as a coordinated unit, and the mountain lion, we can't locate it." James nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I was afraid of. Mountain lions are ambush predators, it's probably found a high point to observe from." He turned to the professor. "We need to restore power to the containment fields, but first, we need to protect the student body." The next hour was a masterclass in crisis management. James coordinated with Blorp's distributed forms to create a real-time mapping system of the escaped specimen's movements. VEX 427's crystalline body served as a mobile command center, refracting emergency communications across campus. Even the usually timid silicon-based students found their crystalline forms useful for creating temporary barriers in crucial corridors. The real challenge came when they cornered the wolves in the quantum physics department. The pack had found their way into a laboratory filled with sensitive equipment and terrified students from 17 different species. "Everyone stay absolutely still," James commanded through the emergency broadcast system. "No sudden movements, no rapid color changes, no pheromone releases. Professor, I need you with me." Professor Zewexdal's tentacles quivered but held firm. "What do you require?" They're not hunting, they're scared. This environment is completely alien to them. We need to give them a clear path back to their habitat, but first, we need to calm them down. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. This is an ultrasonic collar used by Earth wildlife specialists. It emits frequencies that wolves associate with pack members. The professor watched in astonishment as James slowly entered the laboratory, using his understanding of wolf behavior to appear non-threatening while maintaining authority. The wolves' ears perked up at the collar's signal, their posture shifting from defensive to attentive. Meanwhile, RYLTX reported success in herding the crocodile back toward its habitat using controlled air currents, proving that even Earth's most ancient predator could be managed with proper understanding and teamwork. The mountain lion proved to be the final challenge. Just as James had predicted, it had found a high perch in the antimatter research wing. Using Blorp's distributed awareness, they managed to track its movements and eventually guide it back to safety using a combination of Earth wildlife management techniques and alien technology. As the last containment field hummed back to life, the full impact of what had happened began to sink in. The Institute's students and faculty had just witnessed something unprecedented, beings from across the galaxy working together to handle Earth's apex predators, led by a human who bridged the gap between worlds. Professor Zyxtal found James in the aftermath, supervising the final security checks. Mr. Harrison, the professor's tentacles moved in complex patterns of respect. I believe we have all underestimated not just humanity's ability to handle dangerous creatures, but your species' gift for teaching others to do the same. James smiled tiredly. That's the thing about coming from a death world, Professor. You learn that survival isn't just about being the strongest or the most dangerous. It's about understanding, adapting, and working together. He looked around at his alien classmates, who were now viewing him with something that transcended their previous fear and fascination. Sometimes the most valuable survival trait isn't what you can do alone, but what you can help others learn to do together. As the Institute's systems returned to normal, one thing was clear: the incident would be remembered not as a catastrophe, but as a turning point in galactic education. The day when beings from across the universe learned that sometimes the best way to handle the dangers of a death world was to learn from those who called it home. Understanding the Deathworlders. The emergency faculty meeting of the Galactic Institute was like no other in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from every department crowded the grand amphitheater, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. At the center of attention stood James Harrison and Professor Zyxtal, facing the Institute's High Council. High Chancellor VXon, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate metallic shell, spoke first. This council has reviewed the events of what is now being called the containment crisis. By all standard protocols, this incident should result in the immediate termination of the Earth species program. A ripple of nervous energy passed through the assembled faculty. James stood firm, though he noticed Professor Zyxtal's tentacles twisting anxiously. However, the Chancellor continued, the outcome of this crisis has forced us to reconsider many of our fundamental assumptions about Deathworld species, both the specimens and their handlers. Holographic displays activated around the amphitheater, showing footage from the crisis. James watched as recordings displayed the coordinated response, Blorp's distributed consciousness tracking the escaped predators, RYLTX's gaseous form creating precise air currents to guide the crocodile, Vex 427's crystalline body refracting emergency signals. What we witnessed, the Chancellor said, was not just crisis management. It was an unprecedented demonstration of interspecies cooperation. Mr. Harrison, would you explain to this council why you chose to involve other students in handling Earth predators? James stepped forward, his voice clear and confident. With respect, Chancellor, I didn't choose to involve them, I chose to trust them. Each species in this institute has unique abilities and perspectives. The crisis wasn't solved because of my knowledge alone, but because we combined our different strengths. Professor Zyxtal's tentacles moved in a pattern of academic excitement. If I may, Chancellor, this incident has provided invaluable data. We've long studied how different species adapt to their environments, but we've never fully explored how they might adapt to each other. A member of the Council, a collective consciousness of microscopic organisms, formed into a questioning pattern. But the risks are essential to understanding, James interjected. On Earth, we have a saying, experience is the best teacher. Yes, the containment breach was dangerous, but it taught us more about interspecies cooperation in 3 hours than we might have learned in 3 years of controlled studies. The amphitheater erupted in multilingual discussion. James noticed something remarkable: species that normally kept their distance from each other were now clustering together, engaged in intense debate. The crisis had broken down more than just physical barriers. High Chancellor Vexon raised an appendage for silence. We have received an unprecedented number of petitions from students. Many are requesting expanded courses in Earth biology and Deathworld adaptation strategies. Even more surprising, we have received inquiries from 17 other galactic institutions about establishing similar programs. James and Professor Zewextal exchanged glances. This was more than they'd hoped for. Therefore, the Chancellor continued, this Council proposes not only to continue the Earth Species Program but to expand it into a full department, the Center for Deathworld Studies and Interspecies Adaptation. The announcement triggered a wave of bioluminescent displays and pheromone releases from the assembled faculty. James felt a surge of pride and responsibility. Mr. Harrison, the Chancellor addressed him directly, your handling of the crisis demonstrated something we had not considered. Perhaps the true value of studying Deathworld species lies not in understanding the creatures themselves, but in learning how different species can work together to handle challenges that seem insurmountable to any one species alone. Professor Zewextal moved forward. Chancellor, if I may suggest, we should expand our focus beyond just Earth species. There are other Deathworlds in the galaxy, each with their own lessons to teach. What Mr. Harrison has shown us is a methodology for turning perceived threats into opportunities for learning. The Council spent the next several hours outlining the new department structure. James found himself appointed as a special advisor, tasked with developing safety protocols that would allow for hands-on learning while maintaining appropriate security measures. As the meeting concluded, a junior faculty member, a photosynthetic being from a low-gravity world, approached James. Is it true that on Earth, different species regularly cooperate in what you call ecosystems? James smiled. Every living thing on Earth is part of an interconnected web. Predators, prey, plants, microscopic organisms, they all play their part. Maybe that's the most important lesson we can learn from Earth: no species exists in isolation. We're all part of a larger system. The implications of this new understanding spread through the Institute like a quantum wave. Research proposals were revised to include multi-species approaches. Students from different worlds began forming study groups, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. As James walked back to his quarters that evening, he passed the reinforced containment units housing the Earth specimens. The wolves, mountain lion, and crocodile had all been safely returned, but they were no longer viewed with just fear. Now they were seen as teachers, helping the galaxy's brightest minds understand not just the nature of Deathworlds, but the possibilities that arose when different species learned to work together. Professor Zewextal found him there, all 4 eyes focused on the specimens. You know, Mr. Harrison, when we first approved your enrollment, many thought we were making a dangerous mistake. Now I believe we weren't being dangerous enough. How so, Professor? We were so focused on the risks of bringing Deathworld species into our institution that we never considered the risk of not learning from them. Sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is refuse to understand something just because it scares us. As the Institute's 3 suns set, casting rainbow shadows through the crystalline spires, James realized they were on the verge of something revolutionary. The containment crisis had done more than prove humans could handle dangerous situations. It had shown the galaxy that the best way to face any challenge was to face it together. Legacy of the Predator Handler. One galactic standard year after the containment crisis, the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies had transformed beyond recognition. The once sterile halls now featured reinforced observation galleries where students from across the cosmos could safely study Earth specimens. But the most remarkable changes weren't in the infrastructure, they were in the attitudes of the beings who walked those halls. James Harrison stood before his final presentation as a student, facing an audience that included not just the Institute's faculty and students, but representatives from 27 galactic civilizations. The High Council had declared this symposium on Deathworld studies a landmark event in galactic education. When I first arrived here, James began, gesturing to the holographic display behind him. Most species viewed Earth and its inhabitants as an evolutionary anomaly, too dangerous to study up close. Today, I'm proud to present the results of our first year of integrated Deathworld studies. The display shifted to show footage from various classes and research projects. A group of crystalline beings used their refractive properties to create safe observation points near a pack of wolves. Gaseous entities like RYLTX had developed new techniques for monitoring predator movements without disturbing them. Even the hive mind collectives had found ways to contribute their distributed consciousness to wildlife tracking and behavior analysis. But our most significant discovery wasn't about Earth's creatures, James continued. It was about ourselves. Every species in this program brought unique perspectives and abilities that changed how we approach interspecies education. Professor Zyxtal, now the head of the newly established Center for Deathworld Studies, moved his tentacles in a pattern of profound agreement. The professor had become one of the most vocal advocates for what they now called the integrated response theory, the idea that different species working together could handle challenges that would be impossible for any one species alone. "We've received confirmation," James announced, triggering excited murmurs throughout the audience, that 5 other major institutions across the galaxy will be establishing their own Deathworld studies programs next semester. But more importantly, the methodology we've developed here is being adapted for other fields of study. The holographic display showed clips from other departments, engineering students from various species combining their unique abilities to solve complex problems, medical researchers using multiple species perspectives to understand diseases, even artistic collaborations that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Blorp, who had become one of the program's most successful students, demonstrated their latest research, using their ability to split into smaller forms to create a living early warning system for wildlife researchers. Their work had already led to breakthroughs in non-invasive observation techniques. "The greatest predator on Earth," James explained, "isn't the wolf, the lion, or any other creature. It's presumption, the belief that because something is different or dangerous, it can't be understood or worked with. We've proven that wrong, not just with Earth species, but with each other." As if to emphasize his point, the presentation included footage from last month's incident, when a silicon-based student had fallen into the crocodile habitat. Instead of panic, the response had been immediate and coordinated, gaseous students creating an air cushion, crystalline beings refracting emergency signals, and gelatinous forms creating a safe extraction pathway. What could have been a disaster instead became a perfect demonstration of their new protocols in action. Looking ahead, James concluded, "We're not just preparing for more Earth species studies. We're establishing exchange programs with other Deathworld civilizations. Every harsh environment, every dangerous ecosystem, has something to teach us. But more importantly, every species has something to contribute to our understanding." The High Chancellor, speaking for the assembled dignitaries, made an unprecedented announcement. The Galactic Council has officially reclassified Earth from Category 12 Deathworld to Category 1 Advanced Evolution Laboratory. This new classification recognizes that while Earth's environment and species remain challenging, they represent unique opportunities for galactic learning and cooperation. After the symposium, James found himself in the observation gallery, watching the wolves interact with their enriched habitat. Professor Zyxtal joined him, all 4 eyes reflecting the scene. "When you first stepped into my classroom," the professor said, "I thought we would be teaching you about galactic biology. Instead, you taught us something far more valuable." "What's that?" Professor. That the true measure of intelligence isn't just how well a species adapts to its environment, but how well it can help others adapt too. Humans aren't just Deathworld survivors, you're Deathworld interpreters. You bridge the gap between harsh realities and new possibilities. As they watched, a new group of students entered the observation area, a mix of species that would have never voluntarily shared space a year ago. They worked together seamlessly, each contributing their unique abilities to the observation process. You know, James reflected, back on Earth, we have a concept called keystone species, organisms that hold an ecosystem together, making it possible for other species to thrive. Maybe that's humanity's role in the galaxy, not to conquer or dominate, but to help different species find ways to work together. The professor's tentacles moved in what James now recognized as profound satisfaction. Perhaps that's why your world produced such dangerous creatures, not to make you stronger, but to make you better teachers. As the Institute's 3 suns set once again, casting their light through the crystalline spires, James thought about all the changes 1 year had brought. The Galactic Institute had started as a place where different species studied each other from a safe distance. Now it was a living laboratory of cooperation and understanding, where the most valuable lessons came not from observing differences, but from discovering how those differences could work together. The legacy of the Predator Handler, it turned out, wasn't just about managing dangerous creatures, it was about showing the galaxy that the greatest challenges could become the greatest opportunities for growth, understanding, and unity.